Thanks to the elders at the congregation at Denton and all the work that you've done here, the congregation, and putting this meeting on. I really appreciate it. Brother Mike McCorkle called about 6 months ago and began looking for a speaker to cover this topic, and he called the best scholar that he knew, and the fellow was too busy, couldn't do it, and so he was very frustrated. So he said, well, I'll call the best biblical scholar that I know, and I'll ask him. And of course that fellow was too busy, and so Mike said, well, I'll call the best looking fellow that I know, and I just couldn't say no 3 times in a row. So I've got to tell you, when I first saw this word cosmological, I wondered if it had to do with women's makeup. I just didn't know. The cosmological argument is based on a philosophical statement and a law, the law of causation, that everything has a cause, that things have a reason. We all know this intuitively. Our children ask us incessantly all the time, why? Why? It's one of the first laws we learn as children. Why? Why are the things the way they are? Why does this happen? Why does that happen? And at the base of that question is the concept that everything has a cause. Everything has a reason for happening. And so there are laws and logic formulate to build this question about the why things happen, the cause, the causation, the uncaused first cause is one of those arguments. Now there's some things that you learn as you begin to study this. For example, it is impossible for a causal loop to exist. And what that means is just to keep asking why, because you're going to run out of reasons in the universe. The universe is limited in its scope, and you'll keep asking why until you find your way back to your original answer, and what you'll have is this big circular reasoning. It's not possible. And so thereby this idea that there is the uncaused first cause comes into play. Now, I work in the mechanical industry, specifically the maintenance industry, and so it was helpful to me to apply this to something I'm familiar with, and that is something that I do at work called the root cause analysis. And we learn in our schools that they teach us about doing root cause analysis that you want to ask the question why 5 times. You go back 5 times to learn why did this event happen. And we use that when maybe a piece of machinery breaks. Maybe a very expensive piece of machinery breaks, and we want to find out why did it break. It didn't just break for no reason. It broke for some reason. And so you begin to ask the question, why did it break? What made this piece of equipment break? And of course, in my industry, what we do then is we design maintenance solutions to prevent it from breaking the next time. And generally the rule is you go back 5 times, but the truth is the reason we have that rule, you only go back 5 times, because there's no end to that. You finally end up at the CEO of the corporation, or some problem you had in your childhood, or the thing you just go back forever and ever. Well, I want to apply this to something I had to do at my home recently to help maybe understand this topic. I like to simplify things down, make them understandable. And so this helps me to sort of go through this exercise. I was holding a gospel meeting in La Prada Drive here in Dallas about 3 or 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago. And I got a message on my phone on a Friday morning right before I was headed out to go, and the message said, the security alarm has gone off at your house. And I think it was 7:33 on Friday the 13th, 7:33 in the morning. That should not have happened. There was nobody there. My wife was at work. There was supposed to be nobody at the house. So the first thing I did is I started called my wife. Did you have to come back home? Did you accidentally set the alarm off? No. Is the cleaning lady coming today? Maybe she set the alarm off? No. I called the kids. Any kids over at the house? Did you set the alarm off? No. Would I have concluded that this alarm system just went into alarm on its own? Just happened? Of course not. It went off for a reason. There was some reason. So I asked the reason, why did the alarm go off in my house? Well, when I went home, I began to research it. There's actually a log, and you can look at the log and find out, and I discovered that a motion detector in the dining room had sensed motion. This is a little bit like the game Clue that we used to play, Mr. Mustard in the dining room with the candlestick. That's why the alarm went off. The motion sensor in the dining room had sensed motion. Oh, I found the reason. No, I just found one of the causes. Why did the motion sensor in the dining room sense motion? What happened? What caused that? Maybe somebody kicked the door in and walked through, looked at the door, it wasn't broke. Why did the motion sensor in the dining room sense motion? Well, as I began to investigate, I found there's a light fixture in my dining room, and that light fixture, as I stood and watched it, would swing back and forth very slowly, maybe as much as a ½ inch or 3/4 of an inch, and it would swing back and forth. And so that motion set off the motion detector. I found the reason why. Or did I? So I asked the fourth question. Why is the light fixture swinging back and forth? What caused the light? Did it just decide to start swinging on its own? Did the manufacturer of the light fixture build that intelligence into that light fixture that it just started swinging? No. There was some reason it started swinging. And so as I began to investigate further, I found that in the attic directly above the light fixture is my furnace. And the furnace in the attic, the blower wheel was slightly out of balance. And as it was out of balance, I noticed the light fixture was shaking sort of in synchronous motion with that furnace as it was shaking. I found the reason. That's why the light fixture was shaking, which made the motion detector sense motion, which made the alarm go off, which made me at 7:33 on July the 13th say, I have an intruder in my house. It wasn't an intruder, it was the furnace shaking. Did I find the reason why? No, not yet. The furnace isn't supposed to be shaking. What caused the furnace to shake? Well, I kept investigating it. I found that the blower wheel was dirty. And the reason the blower wheel was dirty is because the filter had not been replaced. The filter was dirty. And so I found the culprit. I had a dirty filter that made the furnace shake, that caused the motion detector to sense motion, that caused the light fixture to swing, that caused the motion detector to sense the motion, that caused the alarm to go off, that caused my pager to go off and say, you've got an alarm. Now, at this point, I realized I needed to bring in a consultant. We do this at work when we do root cause analysis. I see all the engineers out there shaking your head. You know what I'm talking about. You bring in a consultant to help you. I employed the services of my wife. Why is this filter dirty? And it didn't take her very long to provide the answer to why the filter was dirty. Was that the root cause? Not really. Why was I not taking care of the filter? Well, there may be an answer. Do you understand that you just keep going with another cause and another cause and another cause, and there's no end to this loop? Eventually, you know what's going to happen? You would go through the universe of causes until you came back to the alarm panel there in my house, and you would run out of possible causes. It is impossible for a causal loop to exist. There must be a break in that loop. Now, that's what we meant when we said the law of causation, the causal loop. That's what we're talking about. There must be a break in it. This is the essence of the argument for God when you say the uncaused first cause. What was the source? What is the source for all causes in the universe? When you begin to examine the universe, it doesn't take long to find that there's great sophistication in the universe. I believe this afternoon Brother Jerry McCorkle is going to talk about creation, and he may cover some of this material, so I don't want to get too much into it. But as you begin to examine the universe, and particularly life, the DNA exhibits incredible intelligence and design. As a matter of fact, there's a term coined lately called irreducible complexity. And what that means is that the complexity of things like the DNA molecule is so complex that it's irreducibly complex. You can't break it down to its basic components and have any kind of explanation as to why it exists unless there's some sort of inputted cause. Something made it that way. Recent movie, I say recent, 4 or 5 years ago, a fellow named Ben Stein made a movie called Expelled, and he interviewed a well-known atheist, a man that is a champion for the cause of atheism, Richard Dawkins. And he asked Richard Dawkins about this problem of DNA and its complexity and its irreducible complexity. And Richard Dawkins hypothesized that there had to be some sort of outside source or force to create this, what looks like a design within the human DNA. And he postulated that it might be aliens from another planet. Well, the problem with that statement is that still leaves the question, why? What was the cause of that? That just found another cause. That's just a sleepy guy sitting in a chair that forgot to change the filters. That's all that is, you see. So it really doesn't answer the question of what is the reason behind that. And as you begin to examine this subject of irreducible complexity, that's a complicated word. I want to explain what that is, because you may hear that some more today. Irreducible complexity. This is a picture of a NATO aircraft. It is taken apart, setting in pieces out on the tarmac. It's all there. Now let me just ask you a question. As it sits right there, will that airplane fly? No, it won't. But I might say all the parts are there. Every piece of that plane is sitting right there. Will it fly? No, it won't. And the reason is because an airplane is more than the sum of its parts. There is complexity incorporated into an airplane that can't be explained simply by examining the individual parts of the airplane. No one of those parts will get up and fly up into the air. They won't do it. But when you put them together, it begins to have a purpose greater than the sum of its parts. Now that's true in a lot of parts of the world. That's true in the local church. The local church is this way. It's greater than the sum of its members. There are more things it can do. There are all kinds of examples of that. The doctors that study the eye will tell you that the eye is so complex and so difficult to understand that it is filled with irreducible complexity. And without going into the idea of evolution or whatever, it's just to say that the world is filled with so much complexity that it begs to answer the question, what was the cause of it? It must be, whether you're looking at on the macro level or the micro level or the macro level, the entirety of the universe, it is filled with complexity beyond understanding. And it demands an answer to that question, what is the uncaused? Is there an uncaused first cause? And what is that uncaused first cause? Brother Yancey talked about going off to college and your professor challenging you. I will tell you, I had that experience. Brother Yancey, my first class, first day, freshman year, Dr. Shanahan walked into the class, a Lit 1 class, go figure. Walked in and looked across the class of 30 or 40 students and said, I'm going to turn all of you good little Baptists into atheists. Well, I had a leg up already because I wasn't a Baptist, so. And that was her goal of that class. I know exactly what that's like to go off to school and be challenged. And one of the things I want to give you, anybody, but especially students, young people, as you're going off to the world and you're going to be challenged on some of these ideas, I want to give you some comfort that a few people in Arkansas, Texas, and Oklahoma are not the only people that believe this. This is a widely held and reasonable view that there is some type of uncaused first cause. The Greek philosopher Parmenides, he was a contemporary of Daniel. He wrote a poem. It's a very interesting poem. It talks a lot about truth. And Brother Jay probably read some of that as he studied his material. Talks a lot about a lot of different things. One of the things he concluded as he considered the universe and all the things in it is the most basic statement. Nothing comes from nothing. Well, the inverse of that is, if you've got something, it came from something. If the alarm went off, it didn't just happen for no reason. If DNA is irreducibly complex and filled with evidence of design, that didn't just happen for nothing. So we're not alone in holding this view. Students, you can put your arm around Parmenides and tell your professor, me and Parmenides, I know I'm saying it wrong, Dale, forgive me of that. Me and this fellow here that's got a fancy bust, we agree that this is a reasonable argument, that there is an uncaused first cause, but he's not the only one. Plato wrote several documents, and two documents that deal specifically with this, the Law, Book 10, and also to Timaeus, the nature of the physical world. He talked a lot about some of the things Jay talked about, the eternal world versus the physical world. And some of the conclusions that Jay talked about are conclusions that Plato led to, that there must be an external, eternal world that pushes its force or causes the physical world to be the way it is. And Plato come up with some conclusions regarding the cosmos, the universe, and the stars and the things that we see in the sky. And he said that they have motion, they move around, therefore this motion must be imparted or self-originated motion. And since the law nothing comes from nothing is true, it can't be self-originated motion. And so he concluded that this motion in the cosmos, the movement of the universe, is an imparted motion. Something caused that motion. And so he said that since nothing comes from nothing and nothing changes without a cause, the cause must be a demiurge, he called it. And that word gets used a lot for a lot of different reasons. The Greek meaning for that word is basically craftsman or carpenter. Plato concluded that this universe had to be put in place, motion had to be imparted, there had to be a cause that caused it to be, and he theorized this cause came from the eternal world, not the physical world, and I'll explain why in a moment. And that this cause was a craftsman, a carpenter. You and I call him the creator. So you're not alone in holding that the uncaused first cause is a reason to believe in an almighty creator, a creator of all things, truly the uncaused first cause. Another fellow that followed Plato, a man by the name of Aristotle. Brother Jay referenced Aristotle also. Aristotle disagreed initially. He disagreed with this concept that Plato made in saying that there must be some uncaused first cause. Aristotle said that no, the universe itself is eternal. Therefore, it is its own cause. He said this would be true unless it can be proven that the universe, the physical universe, is not eternal. And he said if it's not eternal, then there must be something that he described as the efficient first cause. So Aristotle was our opponent in this view. He didn't believe in it. But he did admit that if it can be proven the universe is not eternal, the physical universe is not eternal, then there must be, absolutely must be, an efficient first cause. Well, time has proven that our universe is not eternal. I'm not a scholar on this subject. I did stay at a Holiday Inn last night, so I'll try to explain to you this idea of the universe being eternal. There's two or three reasons why we know, and when I say we, scientists know that the universe is not eternal. One of them is the law of gradation. The universe is in a state of entropy. Think of it as a clock that you, by the way, okay. We used to have these things on our wrists that you wound up, and they were called watches. You wind them, and then they would run down after a while, for those of you that have other kinds of keeping time. So the universe is like this watch that you wind up, and it keeps time, but it finally runs down, the law of entropy. Okay, I want you to think with me for a moment. If we live in a universe that is in the state of running down, it's like a river running to the ocean, I want you to back up in time. What happens? You reach the absurd. You reach a universe that is wound tighter than can be imagined, you see. What happens if you look at the law of gradation, the law of entropy, and go forward? You reach absolute destruction. What you reach is the conclusion that the physical universe is not eternal, that it had bookends, a beginning and an end. In the last several years, the scientists that do the particle accelerators in Germany have learned through the study of quantum mechanics and quantum physics that they can break down through mathematical calculations things like particles that go around the nucleus of an atom, and that they study that, and they found that those particles move at such a rate that you can mathematically determine when they started and that they are running down. And so there's a lot of science behind this idea, to the point now that Aristotle's idea that the universe is eternal is universally rejected. Most scientists, or many scientists, subscribe to something like the Big Bang in order to explain it, but all agree the universe is not eternal. Therefore, Aristotle's point of view, his sort of secondary reason, is absolutely true. If the universe is not eternal, there must be an efficient first cause. St. Thomas Aquinas, I encourage you to read some of the things he wrote. Had a lot to do shaping Western culture. He was as a Catholic priest, a man very intelligent. He wrote a whole document called Summa Theologiae, which discusses this very subject, the idea of the uncaused first cause. And he had basically 5 premises that he based his argument on. The first is motion, very similar to Plato. Things don't just start moving on their own. There's a reason they move. Somebody had to impart motion. Therefore, there is an uncaused first cause. Existence. There is existence. Existence didn't come into its own by itself. We live in a real world. Something had to cause it. There is an uncaused first cause. I'm summarizing, by the way, lots and lots of writing that he gave. Contingent. There are beings that are necessary and beings that are contingent. We human beings are contingent beings. We're contingent on something else causing us. I didn't just show up one day out of thin air. Something caused me to come into existence. My mother and father, you see, I'm a contingent being. Since I was caused and my mother and father were caused, and you go back through this process of contingent necessary views, you see that something had to impart its cause on life. Gradation, we talked about a moment ago. Design, the concept that the universe is filled with design, therefore there must be, if you will, a designer. All of these point to this basic fundamental concept of an uncaused first cause. So when you go to class and Dr. Shanahan says, I'm going to turn you into an atheist because you are a minority in your view, you bunch of redneck hicks, because you believe in God, because that is what they're going to tell you, by the way. And you begin to feel alone, like you're all by yourself in that classroom. I want you to just do this. You say, me and Aristotle and Plato and Parmenides and Thomas Aquinas and Mike Minson believe there's an uncaused first cause. It's not unreasonable to believe that. As a matter of fact, it is unreasonable to believe otherwise, because you are now forced to believe in a causal loop, which is not logical at all. Don't be afraid of that perspective. There is an uncaused first cause. We call him, we think of him as the creator, but there is an uncaused first cause. Okay. The great scholar Paul was standing on Mars Hill, the very place where these things were discussed, whether it was Parmenides or Plato or Aristotle. The very place where these men were debated, the things they held to be true, that place Paul stood there and now was challenged with convincing these people that the God of the Bible, the Hebrew God, the Christian God, is that uncaused first cause. That's what he was charged with. And so he began his speech. And as he began his speech, he complimented them. He said, you're very religious people. I see that. He said, I see that you even have an altar to an unknown God, and I'm going to tell you that's the God that I want to tell you about, the one that you have admittedly said you don't know. And as he talked about that, he began to share things with them they had in common. He said, you know, that we are his offspring. We agree with that. Your poets have said that. The Apostle Paul was banking on the very teachings of men like Plato and Aristotle and Parmenides as he stood there. And as he stood there, he even offered this idea: in him we live and move and have our being. In this uncaused first cause. He offered that as basically a concept they would agree with. That this uncaused first cause is why we live. It is the reason for our life. He is the creator of life, the uncaused first cause. The Apostle Paul concluded with the story of Jesus Christ. He concluded with the resurrection. And as we go forward, I want to show you why, if you really want to learn about the uncaused first cause, go to the cross. Let me make the case for that. Is the God of the Bible the uncaused first cause? Is that what the Bible says of this God? When Moses grew up for 40 years, he grew up in the house of Pharaoh. Stephen said of him that he was educated in all the ways of the Egyptians. Not just educated in their ways, he was mighty in word and in deed. Moses wasn't just a man who knew about the Egyptian ways. He knew them, was able to speak of them, and able to perform works regarding them. Mighty in word and deed, Moses was. This meant Moses would have known about their gods. He would have known about their culture. He may have even worshiped their gods as a young man. There's a lot we don't know about Moses' youth. Now, you all know that at 40 years old, Moses was exiled from Egypt, went into the wilderness, and there he saw a vision. In this vision, he saw a burning bush. And in this burning bush, a voice began to speak to him and tell him, I want you to go lead my people out of Egypt. Moses, as you know the story, said, oh, I'm not able to do that. I can't speak. I'm not a very good leader. He gave all his reasons why. And one of Moses' questions was, when I go back, who am I going to tell them that you are? What is your name? Put some context on that for a moment. We read our view into the scripture so many times. Please try our best to see that from their perspective. He just came from a country where they worshiped hundreds of gods, and they had names. Isis and this and that, and they all had names. Not that they had forgotten the God of Abraham, but that's the world they lived in. And to them, the God of Abraham was the Eli of Abraham, generic word God of Abraham. And so Moses said, so who am I going to tell them that you are? ISIS? Maybe you're the God of the Nile. Maybe you're the God of this or that. Who are you? I think you've got to understand Moses' question in that context. God told Moses something amazing. He said, you tell them that my name is I am. I am that I am. The words, that Hebrew phrase is very difficult to translate. The people who translated the Septuagint version of the Greek Old Testament did not translate it. They didn't try. They put in all caps the word Lord anytime that name appeared. It roughly is the word we use, Jehovah or Yahweh. The word is really made up of a word that means exist. I am. And so what God was saying to Moses when he spoke to him, he said, I caused to be because I caused to be. What God told Moses, you tell him what my name is. My name is the uncaused first cause. I am, God says, the uncaused first cause. When Moses came to Pharaoh and said, God said, let our people go. Pharaoh said, I don't know this God. I never heard of this one. That's right. There is no other God on the planet Earth that claims to be that. Search it out. Of all religions on the face of the earth, no other God claims to be the uncaused first cause. Our God is the uncaused first cause. And he told Moses so. And so as he told Moses this, Moses said, okay, well, you are the uncaused first cause, and I've got to tell them that. And so that idea began to be permeated in Hebrew teaching. As Moses wrote down the first 5 books of the Old Testament, he referred to the times before this passage in Exodus 4, he referred to God as Yahweh. In our English Bibles, matter of fact, you'll see, I've got it up here. You'll see it in all caps, L-O-R-D. When you see that, that's Yahweh. That's what that is. Even the English translators chose not to literally translate it for the most part, but they put it in all caps to notate that, because this name was to be respected. The children of Israel would only whisper this name. It was held in such high regard. They were very careful about writing it. In every way they honored this God because he is the uncaused first cause. He is the answer to your question, why? It is him, the uncaused first cause. God, Yahweh, I am because I am. I cause to be because I cause to be. The Bible is like a root system of Bermuda grass woven through it with this concept. In the beginning, God created. You see, the word created is a verb. It is the action. God created. God caused. And as you read that text, you see God caused. God caused. God caused. Over and over, the biblical narrative establishes God as the uncaused first cause. You don't have to ask why when you reach the God of heaven. He is the uncaused first cause. And the whole concept of a creation speaks of that. And let me share with you a view that I've come to learn in the last several years. If you don't think of God as the creator of this universe, you're missing one of the most important parts of who God is, because that establishes him as sovereign. That establishes him as the rule maker. That establishes him as where truth comes from, because it is absolutely objective, because he created it. He caused things to be true. That is who God is, the uncaused first cause. Now, let's talk about something else for a moment. Or let's move on in our thoughts. Jesus Christ now comes to the scene 1,500 years after Moses. the Creator, has put this universe in motion. Between the bookends of its beginning and its end, this physical world has began to decay. Entropy. Not just the universe is decaying, but its occupants are decaying. Now remember, the God of the Bible created a place that was perfect. He called it very good for Adam and Eve to live. That was his purpose in creating it. Now we might talk about free will during our question and answer period, but something happened from his original purpose, what his intent was in his cause. The plane quit flying. His purpose wasn't being fulfilled in the way you might envision it. However, let me tell you this. In the end, he wins. In the end, there will be a new heaven and a new earth in which dwells righteousness, where his people will dwell and we will be with him. So the beginning and the end are identical. But in between is this decay. Now let me ask you about this. This is just a sort of think it through for a moment. If you were to build something, Brother Mike, I believe you do a lot of carpentry work maybe. Let's say Brother Mike built a nice cabinet, maybe a hutch for the china or something. And as he made that, it turned out it didn't work. The doors don't open, the doors don't slide in and out, it tips over, it doesn't work. What would he do? Ignore it? No. He created it for a purpose. He had a reason, a cause for what he was doing. He'd go back and try to fix it, wouldn't he? Well, that's just a china hutch. What do you think the God of the universe will do for this place called this universe, this physical world? Jesus Christ was the I am reaching out to fix this universe. Jesus stood there, and as he spoke with the scribes and Pharisees, said, so the Jews said to him, you are not yet 50 years old, and have you seen Abraham? Jesus said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am. They picked up stones to throw at him, but Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple. You notice what Jesus just called himself there? Jesus said, before Abraham was, I am. If you have any question about what Jesus meant in that statement, just ask the guys that were standing there holding the rocks in their hand. They knew exactly what he meant. And they were going to kill him for saying it, because they held the great I am in high honor. Jesus basically said, I am the one that spoke to Moses. I am the one that causes existence. Jesus said, I am God reaching out to this universe. I am because I am, Jesus said. Notice in Hebrews, the 1st chapter, verse 3, speaking of Jesus, he is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature, and he upholds the universe by the word of his power. Jesus Christ is not only the one who created this universe, but it is by the word of his power that it is held in place. In Colossians, it is said of Jesus, all things were created by him and for him. Now, let's don't take God the Father out of the mix here, but God the Father used his Son as the agent by which he caused creation. So in that respect, Jesus Christ is the uncaused first cause. And not only did he cause the universe to be, but this verse tells us he continues, he upholds it. You remember what Paul said to the Greeks? In him we live, move, and have our very being. Current and perfect tense, it's going on. It is by his word it continues to be. He didn't just cause it, he continues to keep causing it. So I want you to think about this scene for just a moment. As you stand at the foot of the cross, and as you gaze upon the one that hangs there, he is the cause. He is the uncaused first cause that hangs on that cross. He is the righteous. He is the truth. He is the creator. He is the potter. But take a second look. The uncaused cause has become the caused. He took on himself the form of man. The potter has become the pottery. He took on himself the form of this creation. He himself became created. The righteous has become the unrighteous. In his flesh he bore our sins, Peter told us. Look again in his hands and you'll find my name written right there. And your name written right here. And our names written right here. Friend, as you go off to school, if you want to stay close to God, if you want to learn about the uncaused first God, if you want to hang your hat on truth, go to the cross. Stay at the cross. Don't take your eyes off the cross. Thank you very much.